So with these word problems, the first group of word problems we're looking at deal with variables and expressions. That first section we covered in the flip book. Key thing with word problems is you need to read very carefully and give exactly what it is they are asking for. So problem number 1 says Katie purchased clothes that cost D dollars. She paid with a $50 bill. Write an expression for the amount of change she will receive. So key thing is here they want us to write an expression, which we know an expression does not have an equal sign. So we're not solving anything because we don't have an equation. We're just writing an expression. So how would I determine how much money Katie is going to get back?
You put 50 and subtract 3 from it, and it would equal.
Okay, so she's paying with a $50 bill. We're going to subtract the cost of her clothes, which is the variable D. So 50 minus D would be our expression. Okay, so we can't find an answer because we don't know how much she spent. So we don't know what she's going to get back. We're just writing an expression that can be used. Okay. In this particular problem, they told us what to use for the variable. They used the variable D because we're talking about dollars. Number 2 says the yards of fabric needed to make drapes is 4 times the length of the window in inches divided by 36. Write an expression that represents the yards of fabric needed in terms of the length of the window L. So they're telling us to use the variable L. We just need to write an expression, and they're giving us the words. Okay, so similar to what we did back in that variable and expression section. So we have 4 times the length of the window, which is L. So 4L divided by 36. Again, division, we're using the fraction bar. So 4L over 36. Okay. Again, we're not solving it. We don't need to do any other work. We're just taking the words, writing an algebraic expression. Number 3, we're talking about volume of a cylinder. We want to write an expression for it. And again, it tells us exactly what it is we need to do. So we have this symbol. Who knows what this symbol is? Pi. Okay, so we have pi times radius. We're to use r, and it's being squared. R squared multiplied by the height, h. So remember when we talked about multiplication in that first variable and expressions unit. Okay? For multiplication in algebra, okay, we just see those pieces being written together. If you would put the multiplication dot in between those pieces, that would be okay, but it is not necessary. You're not going to see that in algebra. Okay? We just write the number and the variable together. We don't separate them with multiplication symbols. Okay? But if you would have those multiplication dots, that would be okay. With these next word problems, we're focusing on order of operations. Number 4 says Washington High School has 200 less than 5 times as many students as Adams High School. Write and evaluate an expression to find the number of students at Washington High School if Adams High School has 400 students. So they're asking us to do 2 different things. first we want to write an expression. When we write an expression, we're just going to use those words. We're not going to substitute the number that they give us yet. So it says they have 200 less than 5 times as many students as Adams High School. So we see that less than, and we have to remember again that that less than is that time that we cannot write it as we read it. We have to reverse it. So first we're going to start out with the 5 times as many students as Adams High School. When they don't tell you a variable to use, you can use any variable that you want to. Typically in word problems, we choose a variable like you've seen before when they gave us a variable that represents what it is we're looking for. Okay? We're looking for students, but in this problem we have students from 2 different schools that we're talking about. So instead of using S, I'm going to use A for Adams High School. So I have 5 times the students at Adams, and I'm going to use a lowercase. That's what we use for variables. So I'm going to use 5A, and then I can do the minus 200. So that's my expression that I wrote. So that's the first thing. Then they want me to evaluate it if Adams High School has 400 students. So when I evaluate it, I'm going to put the 400 in place of the A. And then work it out. So 5 times 400 is 2,000 minus 200 is 1,800. And I need to make sure to label my answer. So 1,800 students. This next problem, number 5, is working with order of operations. They've worked out the problem, but there's mistakes that have been made. So they want to know which is the first incorrect step. So where was the first mistake made in this problem? Which step is incorrect?
They didn't divide. They added instead of divided first.
Okay. So when we take a look at this, order of operations tells us first we would do the exponent, which they did. From this next step, I should do division, but they did not do the division. They did addition instead. Okay, so step 2 is incorrect because they added instead of divided. We have to do that multiplication or division before we do the addition or subtraction. So because of that, we came up with the wrong answer. Number 6 says to write an algebraic expression to represent the area of the rectangle. Then evaluate it to find the area when x is 6 inches. So first we need to write an expression. So how do we find area of a rectangle? Length times width. So to find area here, I need to multiply those 2 pieces, but I'm just doing an expression. I don't have to work it out. So my expression is going to be x times parentheses x plus 3. you must have that x plus 3 in parentheses. Okay? Because that expression, x plus 3, represents one number, the length of that rectangle. So that's our algebraic expression. Then they want us to evaluate it when x is equal to 6. So now I'm going to put 6 in place of the x's. Order of operations says I do parentheses first. 6 plus 3 is 9. And 9 times 6 is 54. How do I do a label for area? Pardon? Okay, this is going to be inches. So when I look at it, it looks like inches squared. When we read it, though, it's read square inches. Okay, it's 54 square inches for our answer. Okay, so again, two different things we had to do: an expression and then evaluate it. Next one, we're working with properties. A number of different number properties. Number 7 says Brian has 7 quarters, 4 dimes, 6 nickels, and 3 pennies, which can be represented as 7 times 25 plus 4 times 10 plus 6 times 5 plus 3. Evaluate the expression to find out how much money he has, and then name the property used. So first we're going to evaluate. So if I take 7 times 25, what do I get?
175.
175. When I take 4 times 10, what do I get? 40. When I get 6 times 5, 30, and then 3. So when I add them together, I get 248. What's going to be my answer for how much money he has? $2.48. Okay. Because this representation here, when they put those numbers in, was in a cent amount. So we have 248 cents, which is $2.48. Now we need to name the property used. Okay. So we started out with this statement about the coins he had, and then we changed it to a math problem. So if we look back at our properties, which number property are we using? Which number property are we using? Not multiplicative inverse. We're not distributing. We don't have an addition or subtraction problem in the parentheses. What did we do to change from this first part of the sentence when they were talking about coins, and we changed it to the math problem? What did we do?
Substitution property.
It's the substitution property. Because we are substituting a numerical value to these words Same thing as we do when we take a numerical value and put it in place of a variable. Okay? That's the substitution property. Number 8 says Shannon goes for a jog every day. She jogs at a rate of 4 miles per hour for 1/4 of an hour. Then she will have jogged 4 times 1/4 miles. Evaluate the expression and name the property used. So when I evaluate, I need to work this out. 4 times 1/4. What do I do to be able to multiply fractions? Okay, I'm going to write the 4, that whole number, as a fraction by putting it under 1. Now, how do I multiply my fractions together? Not cross multiply. I could simplify before I multiply, okay, because 4 goes into itself once. Okay. How do I multiply those fractions together? Straight across. So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 1 is 1, which gives me an answer of 1 mile. They also want me to name the property used. So if I focus back on this problem that I had, 4 times 1/4. Which property is being used here? Multiplicative inverse. Multiplicative inverse is when you multiply by the inverse, so we flip the fraction, we get an answer of 1. Multiplicative inverse, again, when we multiply and get an answer of 1. Number 9 says the human body has 60 bones in the arms and hands, 84 bones in the upper body and head, and 62 bones in the legs and feet. Use the associative property to write and evaluate an expression that represents the total number of bones in the human body. So if we look back at that associative property, what does that associative property do? So we can keep that in mind when we write our expression. What does the associative property do?
Change like the order stays the same, but the I'm just gonna call it the bubble changes.
The parentheses, the grouping. Okay? Associative property says that when you are adding 3 or more things, okay, the order that you add them in doesn't matter. So we can change how we group things in parentheses. It doesn't matter. Okay? So in this problem, I have 3 numbers that I have to multiply together. So I can put parentheses around the first 2, or somebody might choose to put parentheses around the second 2. Okay. But with the associative property, we have to have something grouped together. Okay. And then whatever you choose to group together, when you find your answer, you need to show that using your order of operations. So if I had the first 2 grouped together, I have to add them first. So I get 144 plus 62, which gives me an answer of 206. If I grouped it differently with my 60, 84, and 62. If I grouped the last two together, then I have to show my work and do my parenthesis first. So I have the 146 plus 60, which still gives me the same answer of 206, and it would be bones. Okay. 206 bones. How many of you knew that there were 206 bones in your body? Okay, second hour, they said you guys learned that in 7th grade. 206 bones in the body. Next is distributive property and combining like terms. Small on me and won't go bigger again, but you've got it in your book too, so you can see it. Okay, so it says John went to the food store and bought 6 cans of tomatoes at $1.04 each, 4 cans of corn for 63 cents each, and 3 cans of tuna for 88 cents each. Write an expression to model the situation and use distributive property to find the total cost. Okay? Most of you looking at that problem would probably not use distributive property to solve that. They are asking us to use distributive property. So here you need to think back to when we were doing those mental math examples in that distributive property section in our flip book. So instead of taking 6 times $1.04, I need to change that so I can make it distribution. So I can split up that $1.04 into 100 plus 4. Okay, so we're using cents. I don't want to worry about decimals, so I'm going to use cents instead of dollars. Then I'm going to add the 4 times the 60 plus 3, and then the 3 cans of tuna, 88 cents. Okay, I could do 80 plus 8, or this might be a place where you would rather use the subtraction and do 90 minus 2. I'm going to do the 80 plus 8. But again, you could use subtraction instead. So now we do the distribution. So I have 600 plus 24 plus 240 plus 12 plus 240 plus 24. And then I would have to add those numbers all together. And when I do that, I get an answer of 1,140. So how am I going to write that to answer the problem? Okay. I need to write that as a dollar amount. Remember, this was cents, so it's going to be $11.40. Number 11, we're going to do the same kind of thing. It says, during a multiplication contest in class, Patrick calculated 307 times 3 faster than anyone else. When classmates asked, he told them he used the distributive property. write and evaluate an expression Patrick would have used with the distributive property. So my single digit 3, I'm going to put outside of my parenthesis. Inside, I'm going to split up that 307. 300 plus 7. And then I wrote it. Now they want me to evaluate it. So I'm going to actually distribute. So I get 900 plus 21, which equals 921. So because they specifically told me to use distributive property, I need to write it that way. I need to show my work using that distributive property. Number 12 says to demonstrate the distributive property by writing 2 equivalent expressions to represent the perimeter of the fenced yard below. So we talked before about area of a rectangle. Now we're talking about perimeter. How do we find perimeter of a rectangle?
You could multiply the length and the width and add it together.
Okay, so multiply 2 by these 2 added together, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, right, because when we do perimeter, we're just adding all 4 sides together. Okay, so he said to take 2 times the x and the y added together. Okay, so if I do my distributive property, then I take 2 times x and add 2 times y. So those are the 2 equivalent expressions to represent distributive property. Okay? Because if I didn't know that, if I added all 4 sides together, okay, I'd combine like terms and have 2y and have 2x, which comes from that distributive property. Okay, so this is what we would be looking for as our solution. And then we finish out with equations. With equations, we need to have an equal sign. Okay. So this says Movies to Go charges $10 a month for unlimited movie rentals. A person can also rent video games for $2 per game. Write and solve an equation to represent the total amount you spent this month if you rented 5 video games. So I'm going to use S for spent. So if we're looking at how much is being spent, okay, it says Movies to Go charges $10 a month. So no matter what, you're spending $10. If you rent 5 video games, in addition to the $10, you are also going to pay 5 video games at $2 per game. So that would be your equation. Now you're going to solve it. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 plus 10 is 20. It's a money amount. So $20 is the amount that you would spend. Next one is very similar to the previous. Sophia pays $22 per month for her gym membership plus an extra $3 per class. Okay. Write and solve an equation to represent the total amount Sophia spent this month if she attended 7 classes. So she pays $22 plus $3 for every class she attended 7. 3 times 7 is 21, plus 22 is $43. And then the last one, an airplane travels approximately 650 miles per hour. Your trip took approximately 3 hours. Write and solve an equation to find the distance in miles your airplane traveled. So distance is the rate, 650, times time of 3 hours, which gives us 1,950 miles.